I'm Beth Pariseau, Senior News Writer at TechTarget, and this is IT Ops Query Season 2, The State of SecOps. Esteban Gutierrez is Chief Information Security Officer and Vice President of Information Security at observability vendor New Relic. Previously, he was an enterprise information security strategist at Intel, and he managed the Network Operations and Security Center for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Welcome, Esteban.
Thank you. Really happy to be here.
We're glad you're here too. So, the annual New Relic Observability Forecast report is out. What are the key takeaways from that?
Yeah, so the annual observability forecast brings together our analysis of the current state of observability and its potential for growth. I think it's the most comprehensive report on observability since it's based on the insights of over 1,700 tech professionals and IT decision makers. And it gives a good deep dive into current trends and future observability strategies. So there's quite a few staggering findings in this year's observability forecast. The report shows that businesses that prioritize and invest in observability have a significant advantage over others when it comes to operational efficiency and overall business performance. That just means having the data to understand your digital business is really key to having a successful business. And so some of the notable takeaways in there are we see companies leveraging observability as getting a 4 times median return on that investment. And organizations are seeing about 79% less downtime when they are using observability, which makes sense. I mean, if you're monitoring what you have, then you can probably react faster or get in front of problems faster. And outage costs are 92% lower for those utilizing full stack observability. So if you're seeing everything that's going on in your full estate, then you're going to get in front of that and faster and not hit those costs as much.
Great. So what is the impact there on security as well?
There's some interesting stuff there. In terms of security-focused takeaways, the data shows an increased focus across organizations on security, governance, risk, and compliance. So we're seeing kind of a combination, or I don't know if it's correlation, or doubt that it's causation, but with better observability comes better governance, better risk management. So we see that 58% of respondents have deployed security monitoring, and that's monitoring pretty broadly across all the board. We also see an increased focus on security, governance, risk, and compliance as the second most commonly cited driver for observability, something around 41%. So it's interesting because as we see more regulation, federal or government oversight or guidance on critical business and business impact, companies are starting to pay attention to that and responding to that.
Right.
So more than 1/3 of respondents, about 39%, have reduced security risks with their current observability solution, which I think is a great stat because as we see more observability, security teams are getting more of the context they need to see in order to understand true risk and true security issues across their business. So the more you see, the better you can respond, the better you can prioritize which risks or actual vulnerabilities to address over others. So those are some pretty key stats there, I think.
Yeah, there has been growing awareness and regulation about cybersecurity among enterprises, even just in the last 2 or 3 years. But you have lots of experience in the cybersecurity field going back longer than that. And I wonder how, from your perspective, you've seen security operations evolve and changed throughout your career.
So I had originally got my start basically doing network operations. And this was in the late 90s. So, that kind of betrays my age. And in that role, it was all about just keeping the links up, right? So kind of plumbing, right? Making sure the data could flow from point A to point B. And over time, we became increasingly involved with other issues that were going on in terms of the data that shouldn't be going over those links. So malicious attacks or people poking at things that they shouldn't be. So we started to see the growth of security operations coming out of network operations on some level, right? That was in the trench groundwork type work, which differed a lot from some of the more formal security work that was going on at the time that was more about access control and highly secure computing. As networking and online businesses started to grow, I think we started to see the development of security teams that were functioning more or less on their own. And taking on a bigger responsibility. Companies started hiring a security person or hiring a firewall person or a network security person to handle the deployment of things like firewalls, intrusion detection, but also to handle incident response and to deal with the kinds of attacks and issues that were hitting businesses in the late 90s, early 2000s, when we started to see the rise of a lot of the more interesting network-based attacks. Over time, I think we saw security get fairly siloed away from a lot of the rest of the business. I saw this at Intel quite a bit, where risk management was very strict and rigid. There was a low risk budget for most any kind of activity there. And in my 10 years there, it was hard not to feel like the risk management team was the team that says no and wasn't very popular with the rest of the business. In fact, I remember when we started our online business, wanted to make use of New Relic, our vendor management team, risk management team, and the IT security team, when we first reviewed New Relic's capabilities, we were very kind of apprehensive at just how much access it had, how much visibility it had, how much it could see. And for us, that kind of visibility wasn't something we really wanted to see, right? We wanted to have better control, better lockdown, better granularity. But over time, as I learned more about New Relic's capabilities, I understood that it brought to us a lot of good context and visibility that actually is very effective for doing better security. And as I developed my understanding of the business and security at Intel, I started to see that we were treating security too much like warfare. It was very antagonistic, us versus them, and kind of this culture of secrecy, building defenses, building firewalls, doing pen tests, and focusing on these divisions and perimeters. It was ultimately, I think it was very reactive and combative. And I started to think more about what we were trying to do, which is really trying to grow the business and help it be successful. And based on some reading and some other work that was going on at that time, developed this idea of cybersecurity as a culture of nurturance. That we should really care for the business and help it grow and succeed. And in that sense, things like transparency and accountability become more key.
Right.
And I found that that started to align more closely with what NetOps teams and DevOps teams were trying to do. They really wanted to see what was going on so they could take action and understand what needed to be done to keep the business up and running or to fix problems. And so towards that end, most of my career in the last decade and a half has really been focused on trying to bridge security with network operations, with developers, with engineers, and ultimately the business as a whole. And through that, working to do things like be very clear about policies, have very clear guidance on what security is trying to accomplish, what are we doing, interpreting compliance and legal oversight in ways that made more sense to the business, and then also developing tools and methods for developers and engineers in the business to do their work securely. So really helping to build options so that teams aren't just told they can't do a thing, but are said, here are the things you can do, and this is what allows you to do the business that you need to do more quickly. So, helping with things like clarity on encryption protocols, clarity on good architecture design, and then tying that back to the commitments that we're making as a business to our customers' trust and security. Over time, this has become a bigger table stakes for customers. They want to know that their data is secure. They want to know that the business is secure and that we're not putting them at risk.
Do you think that's driving a widespread closing of that gap between SecOps and NetOps at enterprises in general, or do you think that that gap is still persisting?
I know people hate it when I say this, but the answer is both. I think we still see this in a lot of traditional enterprise environments, and especially those that are lagging behind with their digital transformation. But I think the ones that have grown and developed in a post-transformation world are the ones where we're seeing more of this combination. We're seeing more collaboration. We're seeing that teams that practice good hygiene, teams that see the benefits of combining observability telemetry with security telemetry, understand that they can do things better, faster, and more efficiently as well. I mean, it really does come down to understanding context, understanding the business, and being able to tie risk back to the business so that we can be more efficient. There's just a huge volume of vulnerabilities and issues hitting every business today. And so a key challenge is really, what is the most important thing for me to be working on? Of these thousands of vulnerabilities that keep hitting us, what are the 1,000 or 100 that I should run to go fix? And what are the other ones that I can maybe wait for or update in a routine kind of maintenance window? And I see observability as being a key to providing that information and that context that allows not just the security team, but also the engineering teams and developer teams to better make those kinds of decisions so that they can see, okay, this vulnerability is on an internet-facing server. that hosts a service that is being hit by thousands of mobile transactions per second, I should go fix that right away because it's key to our business. Whereas this other vulnerability might be sitting in a test environment. Yes, it's something we should be fixing, but given the low amount of traffic and this isn't a production service, then we can walk to that one and fix it later.
I know New Relic has been getting into security fairly recently, alongside the resilience and performance aspects of observability. When you were at Intel, did the teams pool their data into a single tool like that? Has that been a trend that you've witnessed among New Relic customers?
When I was at Intel, things were still fairly siloed there.
Mm.
I'm certain things have improved quite a bit there. I know I'm still in contact with quite a few of my former colleagues at
Yeah.
Intel. But I remember one experience I had back then was the folks that were running the online services component and managing services in the DMZ. They would often come to me and ask, what are the biggest attacks that are hitting me? What is security seeing? What should I be worried about? And I would go to the security operations team and ask them, like, can you tell me what attacks are hitting these online services? And the answer was often, no, we can't, because we're getting the information from everywhere and we're consolidating it into our security data lake or a SIEM, and we're looking for all the attacks, but we can't tie it back to a specific line of service or business, or a website. And I thought that was just crazy. I thought, why? I mean, that's the thing that matters, right? Is the service. We should be able to tie that back somehow. So I feel like that's a problem that has been worked on quite a bit. And at New Relic, it's definitely front and center for us, right? We need to be aware of our production services, the things that our customers care about the most, and be able to prioritize the security alerts and monitors for that. But not just the security alerts, but also things like reliability alerts and errors, anything else that helps us understand the uptime for that service and anything that puts the service at risk. So I think that there is an increasing trend now where silos are starting to break down a little bit, but there's still ways to go for that.
Also, just to level set, I probably should have done this sooner, but is that how New Relic is defining observability, that correlation with services? Or what's your definition? Because sometimes it varies.
Yeah, so observability for us is really just an understanding of all the metrics necessary to understand your business. From my perspective, while there are sets of golden metrics, events, logs, traces, and metrics having to do with your services themselves, understanding entities that exist in your environment based on that context, that understanding only grows when you bring more telemetry in with it. So open observability, right? We want to get as much information as possible about what we care about, what we're monitoring. And so from my perspective, observability is really trying to bring together as much telemetry as we can.
Which ends up being kind of a deluge, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we still see, I think it's fair to say, a lot of SecOps teams still in a reactive mode rather than proactive. So is that where AI comes in, or how do you think things could be improved?
That's a good point. Yeah, that is exactly where AI comes in, where AI can do a lot of work to look for patterns, trends, can actually help reduce the amount of data that you have by looking for a lot of repetitive data and combining that and reducing it to one or two bits of data. So there's a lot of room there for AI to help out with both the management of the data that you have, as well as with the interpretation and understanding of the data that you have. And there's quite a few efforts going on here at New Relic to do that with things like alerting and proactive problem detection as well.
So overall, there are also some pitfalls with security and AI, right? There's use cases for security with AI tools, but there's also the security of AI that's a growing concern. So how do you see that balance playing out, and what should people avoid as far as risks?
One of the main problems I see with AI is really around the fact that if you feed it garbage, you're going to get garbage, right? It's key to make sure that there's good data going into your AI model and that the AI model is doing something useful with it as well. Some of the critical components is really around understanding the integrity of the data. Are the rules and documentation that we're feeding it accurate? Is it up to date? Is it what we really want it to be learning so that it's actually leveraging the right information? Because otherwise it could also amplify the wrong perspective and amplify the wrong ideas around what we're looking for. It also just requires constant iteration and training as well.
You know, one thing I'm asking everybody is just, what do you think is the state of SecOps? And where do you see it going from here in the next year or two?
My hope is that we start to see a further convergence of security, of operations, of engineering, of development. There's this been idea of shifting left in security, of trying to push security, hygiene, and management as far left as possible so that we're looking for vulnerabilities earlier, fixing them earlier, ideally before they go to production, and looking for configuration errors before they become problems as well. My hope is that we can shift everywhere, right? So that the full estate context and understanding that we get from observability combined with the security telemetry allows us to give, for instance, a developer who is starting to build a service or an application knowledge that, hey, you might be programming an issue here that based on our understanding of the production environment, you're creating a dependency here that could lead to a problem, or you're coding in a vulnerability, or you're not making use of the most up-to-date encryption protocols, or you're not securing keys properly. So you need to actually make use of either secret storage that's vetted by the enterprise, for instance. And so it's not just helping developers develop faster, but also helping developers build their services more securely and look for problems earlier in the engineering cycle than they would otherwise. And then as they develop and deploy into production, that you have that combined telemetry of observability and security telemetry actually helping you understand any potential risk or issues that you have going on there. So checking for things, not just checking for things like, are you using the most up-to-date images, but also, are you putting the environment at risk by pushing a change into production when there's already other changes happening that pertain to the services or dependencies that your deploy is touching at that time? Or are you increasing risk by adding more change into the environment, and should we perhaps wait while these other changes? So there's a lot of interesting stuff there that we're looking into helping developers understand and helping the businesses understand so that they're managing that risk better.
What do you think is the biggest challenge or roadblock to that?
Standards, I think, are a pretty big one. There's still a lot of complexity with environments. It's definitely one of the challenges that we have here is that code can be very complex. Software and environments and architecture can be very complex. And so we still have a little ways to go before our automation and our AI models can actually represent the complexity better. It's really around building better software inventory and software bill of materials, SBOM, and making sure that they're accurate, right? And so there's the complexity around that, I think, is something that we're still working on, or that a lot of businesses are still working on.
Absolutely. And there's technical debt there too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, certainly plenty to work on.
Yeah.
And thank you very much for sharing your insights with us. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed this conversation.
This has been IT Ops Query Season 2, The State of SecOps. If you have any feedback on this episode or want to share questions, comments, or stories we should consider covering, please reach out to me at B as in boy, P as in Peter, A-R, I, S as in Samuel, E-A-U at techtarget.com. Please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing to this podcast on your platform of choice. And tune in next week for our continued conversations with industry experts about the challenges facing security operations. Thank you for being with us so far.